Melbourne author George Ivanoff has written more than 100 books for kids and teens, including the Gamers Trilogy, the interactive You Choose series, which when I was teaching, I just watched kids devour, sometimes nearly literally, the Royal Flying Doctor series adventures, and the Other World series. He also has the non-fiction survival guides, which we're going to talk about one of those today, among other things, as well as a ton of other readers. Now, apparently George drinks too much coffee and eats too much chocolate, so there's every chance we'll have to pull him off the walls, but we'll see how we go. He also is a Doctor Who fan in a big way, and I bet you we'll hear about Doctor Who, and I'll be able to share with him my dialect problems. And he has a wife and 2 children. George, it's lovely to talk to you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you. George, how did you get into writing?
Slowly. Look at all. You know, you mentioned Doctor Who before, and that it would get a mention. Well, it's going to get a mention because
I didn't expect it this early, George, but okay.
It all started with Doctor Who, because this, you know, back in my childhood, back in the 70s, before video recorders even existed, you know, the only chance you got to watch something was when it was actually broadcast. So I went from watching Doctor Who to reading Doctor Who books so that I could have more of it to, sorry about that sound.
Oh, that's right. We get all sorts of sound effects. This is the joy.
Yeah, that's my email coming down. I should have shut my email off before starting the interview. I don't know why I didn't. Never. It still wasn't enough, and I started writing my own, you know, Doctor Who stories. So really, really bad Doctor Who fan fiction. But it's what taught me that writing could be fun. Because prior to that, it was just writing that, you know, you had to do in class at school, which I found boring. And so I assumed all writing was boring. But Doctor Who taught me that writing could be fun. And, you know, from there, I went to writing my own, you know, original stuff. And for a long time, it was a hobby. It was, you know, I wrote occasionally for amateur publications and stuff because I was a member of a lot of different science fiction clubs and things. And then one day I thought, wouldn't it be nice to get properly published? And I started sending stuff out. And eventually, after a very, very long time and many, many rejections, I got my first book, which was Life, Death and Detention, young adult short story collection, which came out in 1999.
I think that what you were saying about, you know, the rejection and the long time, you were also, and I don't know if you still do, but you were also an actor. How much does that prepare you for the professionalism and hard work that's required in writing and that tenacity?
Oh, look, I think that there are a lot of similarities, I think, between writing and acting. You need a thick skin because there is a lot of rejection. I mean, you know, with acting, I think on average, an actor gets, you know, 1 in 20 auditions will get them a job. So, you know, that's a high rejection factor there. So yes, there is that. There's also risk taking. I think I tell people that the best thing I ever did for my writing career was to do an acting course, because it taught me to take risks. Because prior to that, I was very risk averse. You know, I would never let people read my stories. You know, why would I do that? They might not like them. You know, bar, you know, selected few people. So yeah, and in acting, you kind of have to put yourself out there and run the risk of, you know, being a fool and, you know, forgetting your lines on stage and all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, it taught me to take risks, and that translated into my writing in terms of allowing people to read it and sending it out to publishers and taking that risk of rejection.
How do you deal with, and it may not happen to you now, but most of us still get the, no, that's not going to happen letters. How do you deal with them, George?
A lot better now than I used to. When I started out, I would submit something kind of randomly without any research that was very poorly done. So I'd submit something and I'd get a rejection, and it was like, oh, I'm not good at this, why am I bothering? And I'd stop writing, and it would be months before I then get back into it, because, you get an idea that just has to be written. And so you get to work on that. You send it out and it gets rejected, and I said, I'm no good at this, I'm not doing it anymore. So there was that little cycle at the beginning. But once I started getting some acceptances, that kind of spurred me on. And then I stopped letting the rejection stop me. And now I'm at the point where it's kind of like, well, so what? I'll move on to whatever the next project is, because it's not me as a person getting rejected. It's not me as a writer getting rejected. It is one piece of writing that's getting rejected. And there are so many reasons why it can get rejected. It's not necessarily because it's a bad piece. It might simply be that it doesn't fit what the publisher wants at that time. Or if it's for an anthology, maybe 3 other writers wrote on the exact same topic and they only needed one. So, there's so many different reasons, and there's no point in trying to, there's no point in fixating on it and running around your mind. You just need to move on and get on with your next project.
I think that was one of the most powerful lessons I learned, that it's not rejecting you, you're not rejected. And I still don't word it properly when I say, how do you, cope with rejection? But how is it when you work? Because it is just that piece of work, and we can't know why or wherefore. I think that's really important advice for all writers. It's not you, it's the work.
So, yeah, if only I handled it better back in the early days, I would have, written more.
George, what advice would you give your emerging writer, maybe even back when you were Doctor Who fan writing? What would you give them now if you could go back and talk to that person?
Look, it's going to be really cliched, I'm afraid, and that is read more, write more, and never give up. They are basically the 3 things that get you through, because the more you read, the more you learn about story and storytelling. The more you write and the more you practice, the better you yourself get. And that never giving up, because there will be rejections. There will be rejections, and sometimes years worth of rejections. And you've just got to push through that. You just cannot give up.
I think I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been from John Marsden, but you've got to write about 1 million words and throw them away before you're ready to be published. I don't know if I've even... I've written.
I'm not game enough to add up everything that I've written.
No, same here. I don't want to know. George, how important do you think it is as a children and young people's writer to actually know young people and to mix with them regularly?
Oh, look, that's an interesting question, because I have known children's authors over the years who didn't have children themselves and didn't really know all that many children. So I certainly think it's possible to be a children's author and not interact with children. There are, you hear of, well-known children's authors who actually don't like children, but they just like writing for children. So I don't know that it's necessary, but I think it's helpful, because you kind of, you absorb the way that they interact with each other and the way that they speak. And, the way kids speak is constantly changing. So, a lot of what I write is dependent on my own memories of being a kid, because that's how I channel, I guess, my feelings and stuff into a story, and the emotion into the story is by remembering what it felt like for me back then. But then in terms of the new interaction and the way kids deal with each other and the way they behave, I'm watching my kids, I'm watching my kids' friends. I do a lot of school visits and talks and stuff when not in isolation. When I talk to kids about the writing process, I tell them that, I'm not just standing here talking at them, I'm also watching them and observing
absolutely.
them, and watching, how they behave or misbehave, how they pay attention or not pay attention, the little things that they do, the fiddling and the looking away and the little whispered comments and all of that sort of stuff. So much of writing, I think, is observation and watching people.
I think so, very much so. And, those little asides, and I remember telling a group of kids once that I can tell that you three have had a fight. Don't come in here after recess and tell me everything's fine. I can tell, because you can read them like a book when you just take that time to look at them.
Yeah.
They're amazing. So you were saying a lot of your childhood influences your book. Is that why the You Choose books, why you took those on?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because I loved reading those sort of books as a kid. I was obsessed with the choose your own adventure novels, the original set. So I used to read them a lot. I still read them occasionally. I've got a whole bunch of them. In fact, anticipating that you would probably ask me about them, I dug out my favorite one.
Oh, wow.
So the reason why this is my favorite one is because the ultimate goal in this is to make it to this utopian-like planet. Right? That's the ultimate goal. There is a whole 2 pages set on that planet. There is no page that leads to that page. There is no story path that will lead to that ultimate goal. So the only way to get to the ultimate goal is to cheat and just go to that page. And I just love the way that plays with your mind. I never read this one as a kid. I read this one for the first time as an adult and went, wow, that's really messing with you. I love it.
That is good. I can remember my brother and sister reading them when they were younger. And then when I was teaching and when I worked at the bookshop, I used to watch them, not literally, but close to literally, walking off the shelves. The kids just love them. And I think too, that adventure of each time you read it, you've got a whole different way it could go.
Yeah, which makes it so much more fun when you can reread the same book but get a different outcome.
Exactly. So, George, just before the great COVID closed down, where we all, turned into hibernators, you released The Gamers. How are they going?
Good. Yeah. So the Gamers trilogy was actually my first set of novels. So the first one came out in 2009, and then 2 years after that, and 2 years after that. And the publisher last year decided it was time to refresh them and give them a new look. And because I can show you the old covers are here, and they're dated.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, but yeah, they're not.
They're dated quite badly. I mean, they were designed to mimic, computer game covers, but computer game covers have evolved so much since that time. So it was time to give them a fresh look. And so we got an artist named Matthew Lynn to do these gorgeous, gorgeous covers.
Aren't they fantastic?
Very much. It's got kind of an almost manga anime sort of quality about them, which I really love. And we changed the individual titles of the books as well to kind of give them snappier, more gamey sort of titles. So rather than Gamer's Quest, Gamer's Challenge, Gamer's Rebellion, they're Game On, Level Up, and Game Over. So yeah, and it was, we had the launch I think 2 weeks before lockdown started, but everybody was already nervous, so it was a very poorly attended launch, unfortunately. But I believe that the sales have been going reasonably well, so I'm really quite excited to have them back in the world, because they're, as I said, my first set of novels, and I have a great deal of fondness for them.
It's a funny thing, isn't it, when you have those, in fact, all your books have such a place in your heart that it is hard to let them go. When you get that, well, they're out of stock now, you sort of go, it's hard. So it's lovely to have them back.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm very happy to have them back in print. Very happy.
Now, your ultimate survival guides, I did laugh watching your, I don't know whether it was quite Bear Grylls-ish, but I'm going to call them Bear Grylls videos.
The book trailers, yes.
Yes. Now, how
Yeah.
on earth are you going to replicate that for the new one? I'm a bit concerned how you're going to do this.
Well, you see, so yes, I had a kind of a Bear Grylls sort of like persona to use for this book. So then the new one, which is the Human Body Survival Guide. Yes, there is a new persona, Dr. George (brackets not a real doctor). So he will be making an appearance in a set of book trailers for that book. Yes.
And will your koala friend be joining you as well?
No, well, not for. Look, he's going to join me here now. So he's not. Oh, wait a minute! I do have something that will be joining me in the videos. Let me just reach across over here. This is a plushy bladder. Look at that! It opens up once, and there's the wee inside it, and all of this sort of stuff. So this is one of the plushies that will be making an appearance in the videos for the Human Body Survival Guide.
Did you make it or did you find it?
My daughter made this. My youngest daughter made this for a school project on the human body that they did, I think it was last year. So they had to pick a body part, or sorry, an internal organ. And one of the things that they had to do was build some sort of a model. And rather than building a model, she made a plushy bladder.
Little did you know that it would be supporting your books.
No, it's great. I love it. And yeah, since I started the trend with having the drop bear, Bruce the drop bear in the first set of videos, it'll be nice to be able to continue the tradition with another plushie.
Exactly. So, George, where did the idea come from for the Ultimate Survival Guides, both of them?
Oh, well, look, it came about in a slightly kind of roundabout sort of way. So the way that I normally work with my publisher is that, once I finish one project, I'll send her a bunch of ideas. I'll pitch a bunch of ideas because I've got so many ideas flying around my head and I never know which one, to work on. So unless there is one particular idea which is standing out as being the one I, really have to work on, I have trouble deciding what to work on. So I will send an email with all the options, like, I'd really like to do, a series about this, or I've got this idea for a standalone novel about that, and let her know just the basics of it and the age group that I think it would be appropriate for. So I did this, after finishing the YouTube's book, the Other Worlds books. I sent off that email saying, well, I could do more Other Worlds, I could do more YouTubes, I could do this, I could do that, I could that. And then right at the end, I popped in a note saying, oh, and if you ever want any non-fiction, I'd be interested because I've done lots of non-fiction for the education market, but I'd really love to do some commercial non-fiction where I don't have all the restrictions of what I can and can't do. And that's what they latched onto. They came back and said, oh, well, actually, we're looking at expanding our commercial non-fiction line for kids. We'd really love to have something like that. Pitch us some ideas. And then I went away and came up with a bunch of, potential ways of doing the non-fiction.
Fabulous. Do you enjoy it, writing the non-fiction?
Oh, yeah. I love the research.
Fabulous.
I love learning. I'm the sort of person who has spent a lot of their life at school and university and so on. And I like learning. I love doing the research. So I enjoy doing the non-fiction stuff.
With the human body, the Ultimate Survival Guide to the Human Body, is there a favourite fact you had to leave out?
Ooh, that I had to leave out. The only stuff that that got left out was in the chapter about poo. So look, the Human Body Survival Guide is taking the approach of focusing on the gross and disgusting and horrible stuff, and then by the end of the book, you're supposed to realize that actually there's a lot of cool and fascinating and interesting stuff about the body as well. But there is a definite focus on the gross. So, there is a chapter on spew, there's a chapter on wee, there's a chapter on poo. And the chapter on poo, I think I just got a little bit too carried away with all the things that could go wrong. So, you know, while my publisher and editor could cope with the sections on diarrhea and constipation and fecal impaction and this sort of stuff, when I started to go into like some more nitty gritty on other things like prolapse and stuff, they went,
wow.
Maybe that's going a little too far. And so we cut out all that section on bits of you falling out.
I grew up on a farm, and I have seen that happen, you know, with different creatures, and I don't want to think it could happen with us. So I'm glad they made you leave it out. George, just a last question. What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading at the moment? Yes, I can actually show you that. It is this one, Lethbridge Stewart, The Daughters of Earth. Can I quickly explain?
Yes, please do.
It's a series of books that's a spin-off from Doctor Who. So they've taken this character from the original series that they got the rights to. So this small publisher got the rights to this character, and they've done a series of books. They release about 6 or 7 books a year in this series. And I have been devouring these lately because I'm writing one. So that's my current project, what I'm working on, my novel for the Lethbridge Stewart series, which is called Fear Frequency. And I am having loads of fun.
That is such an exciting circle that you started as the fan fiction, and now you're writing for a Doctor Who spin-off. So, yeah,
well, I've actually managed to get a little bit of tie-in fiction over the years. It's something that I actively pursue, but it's a really hard area to break into because of very closed shop a lot of the time. But I've managed to have. I managed to get a short story into a Doctor Who anthology years ago. With the Lethbridge Stewart, I had a short story in one of their anthologies last year, and I've got the novel this year. And I did an X-Files one a couple of years ago, which was also kind of cool, and the odd one like that. So, it's loads of fun doing that sort of stuff because it is, to a certain extent, just writing fan fiction and getting paid for it, which is rather cool.
You've got to love that. George, I could chat all day because your enthusiasm and your passion for what you do is so infectious. But thank you for taking time out of your day and for not bringing up Daleks, because I would have had to have run from the room. Thank you so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. And so, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.